as a podcast or as an improv troupe, if anybody says the words no, but, they have to do 10 push-ups immediately. It's a powerful way to run things. Like if you accept that in your podcast or your business or your everyday life, like the next time you have an argument with your significant other, try using yes and versus no, but. It's transformative.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It's your host, Adam Adams. And today we got a different type of show. I don't even remember where I heard this, but there was this person who's like, we're going to do it a little bit different, but kind of the same. Who is that? I can't even remember, but kind of the same because you guys are podcasters, and kind of different because typically my guest that I have on has a business and the podcast flows into the business. So for example, I'll use myself as an example. I've got the podcast on podcasting. You're being interviewed on it right now. And my company is Grow Your Show. It's a podcast agency. And the podcast listener hears that I have that. And sometimes we do business. And so we support people that have a business where it's a coaching program or whatever, and it builds into it. And what I like about today, which is kind of the same and kind of different, is that you guys have a totally different type of show, and it's not for like a coaching program or a real estate coaching program right now. It's really about these different movies. By the way, to the listener, it's called How Have You Not Seen That? And the link is in the show notes. So you can scroll down, you can click on that. I've got two guests. Also, this is different. Kaleb, Jordan, I usually only have one, but was it you, Jordan, who was like, have my partner with me too?
Yeah, this is really a collaborative effort between three of us, actually. And I didn't want to exclude any of my co-hosts from this moment because we all participate in different ways. We all bring different things to the show, creative ideas, production ideas. And I wanted to make sure that we're going to cover everything that you're looking for here.
Cool. That way, if I ask a certain question, you got the whole team. But we're missing one. We're missing the woman.
We're missing Margarita. She has a big job.
We need that feminine energy.
Yeah, I know. We often need that in our lives. That's why she's like our trio. She completes it all. But yeah, she works a girl job. So the rest of us have
okay. Got it. And you're married to her too.
I am. Yeah. You say that our podcast doesn't really serve a business, but it kind of does in a way in that it helps us market our improv comedy group and my creative production company.
I'm going to write that down. I'm loving this. Keep going, though.
Ironically, Margarita, we cast in our improv troupe 18 years ago when Jordan and I started it. So I guess in a way, I ended up casting my wife.
Awesome. Was she your wife back then, or?
No, we just got married 6 years ago. So it's 12 years.
I see how you are.
I like to take my time with it.
It was a long, drawn-out romantic process.
Yeah. Was it like love at first sight? You were like, oh, I've got to cast her so I can get to know her? Quite
the opposite. I mean, we did go on a couple of dates.
Quite the opposite. Does she know that?
Yeah, she very much does. We both got into long-term relationships after I was in the troupe, and it came around in the end.
So it can fill and grow your improv group. I've got a question on that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because you usually have 5 people on the podcast, and it's you two. It's Jordan, Kaleb, and Margarita. And then it's 2 other people. Are those 2 other people from the improv group, or?
Not ours specifically. We have others in our troupe, but we're the 3 main. And then what we do is we cast other improv and theater actors in the broader community throughout Denver, Colorado Springs. We're hoping to expand to larger markets through the network we know.
Okay, so give us the premise of the show. How have you not seen that? Which the link's in the show notes. Give us kind of the premise of the show. And what those other 2 people that change out, I guess they're not always the same 2 people, right?
No.
Okay, so let's talk about what their role is as well.
That one's for you, Jordan.
Okay, yeah. So,
you know what, guys? I need to learn this, and this is good for our listener. Jordan, I'm going to give you a break just to think about the answer just in case, just for a second, because I also need to talk to the listener. I generally only have one person on. And I just made an absolute mistake that many people make when you have more than one. You say a question, but you don't address it to anyone. And so for now on, I think I'm going to be a little bit better on this episode. And I'm hoping that the listener, another podcaster, learns, okay, if I've got more than one person, maybe I should do that too. So Jordan.
Well, I think that's actually kind of a learn by trial and error thing here, because I don't really know how you would know who the best person to direct that question to is.
Touché.
We gave you a little bit of information that Kaleb can answer some technical details, but really either one of us could tell the story about how we got this going here. But I'll take it here. This actually started as an idea about 5 years ago for us. We were hanging around with the rest of our group, and one of our troop members had not seen Goonies. And I think all three of us collectively said, how have you not seen that movie? And through the general chatter, we got to thinking, hey, we should start a podcast on this. And then for 5 years, we just didn't do anything about it. And so we kind of revived the idea at the end of last December, and we kind of spitballed a few different scenarios about how we want to go about this. So we did a couple of pilot episodes with, let's try this thing, let's try that thing. And it's kind of continued to evolve. But the main premise of the show is we grew up on a lot of fantastic movies: Star Wars, Back to the Future, Office Space, there's Indiana Jones, there's all kinds of fantastic movies out there that we love and we can quote all the time. Some of these things we just know religiously. And believe it or not, there's people out there that haven't seen some of our favorite movies, and it kind of blows us away. So we want to have them on our show to, first of all, ask them how have they avoided this movie or just not seen.
Wait a second. I have to interrupt because I need to verify something that it sounds like you're saying. When you bring on these two random guests, they're not allowed to have ever not seen it before?
Yeah.
How do you find people that haven't seen some of these?
That's the tricky one. We literally had to find somebody who grew up in a different country who hadn't seen Back to the Future.
Yeah. That's been a huge challenge, is finding people that haven't seen certain movies. Like, we would love to do a movie like The Princess Bride. I have not found one person yet that has not seen that movie. So if any of your listeners haven't seen Princess Bride, send them my way. But for the most part, like Kaleb said, we have a larger group of improv actors within the Denver and Colorado Springs community that we know. So we just put together like a Google survey and sent it out to them and said, hey, if any of you haven't seen any of these movies, let us know. And through that, we've been able to kind of match a few folks up. And so we work with them to find a time they're available to record, we're available to record. Then we go and kind of research the movie, review it a couple of times, and put together some questions for them. And then we play a game show with them. We ask them first how they've seen it, what do you know about it? We give them our first round of our game is a 10-second summary where they have 10 seconds to summarize the movie that they've never seen and they have no knowledge about.
This is before they've ever seen it.
Yes, yeah. Before they've ever seen it. They come onto the
Guys,
show.
I listened to your podcast and I didn't know all of this stuff. Really? I literally did listen, but on these details you're giving me now, I didn't understand that.
Yeah, these people have no idea.
In that, because that's half the fun. I mean, it's very much based off of British panel shows that, you know, we take a lot of our comedic inspiration from British comedies and British humor. I mean, Jordan and I both grew up just obsessed with James Bond and
Python.
So you marry those two together, and like British panel shows are so ridiculous. They just have these guests on to do these just random ass things. So like you can score more points in our game by completely blowing the answer, but being funny and creative than you can by getting the correct answer. So that's why we invite people that have never seen them. And your first points you have to gain, tell us what the movie is, having never seen it. And then plot point questions that would throw people completely off. I think we were asking somebody about Goonies and our two guests were just like, what is this movie? How does this exist on this planet? Because they had no idea. So yeah, it's very much a comedic driven game show style love overture to our favorite films.
Cool. Is it also recorded in video? And if so, is that a big part of it?
No, it's not, because of the technical limitation of figuring out how to record 5 people efficiently and cost effectively.
And is it all virtual? Like, or do you guys get in the same place?
We have everybody in our studio right now. We are in the next upcoming episodes. We're expanding because we also have an improv network in Boston, New York, LA. So we're starting to expand our reach now that we've got the format down to where we'll start recording with some contestants virtually.
Cool.
I mean, that's kind of the basis of it. I mean, we touched on the main points there. I think this is a game show. This is for entertainment purposes, right? We just want to have fun with these movies that we grew up adoring. And everybody that we've had on has been so much fun. They play the roles very well of people that have never seen this, going into this with an open mind and just making up whatever it is they think they know. Some people may have seen a movie poster or two. There's a few things that, like, how can you not have seen Star Wars references in pop culture these days? So maybe you don't know anything about the movie, but you've seen or heard the reference, I am your father, somewhere. And so maybe you think that Star Wars is all about like an adoption gone wrong, that somebody is going back to find their space daddy, right? So
it does sound what it's like, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we want to encourage those types of answers. We want to come up with plot questions and things that drive those types of fun, creative things. Because as a listener that has seen those movies, you're probably sitting at home just like itching when we ask these questions about what the correct answer is, and then hearing these completely made up ridiculous things from our guests. It can be so much fun.
Interesting. Well, I will say I could be great on your show because I haven't seen very many of these at all. Even the ones that have come out. I don't think I've ever seen episode 1, Legally Blonde, or Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Right there with you.
I definitely have seen Happy Gilmore and Back to the Future.
Yeah.
I've never seen The Godfather, although I do know that one part. Airplane, hadn't even heard of it. Grease, never seen it.
Wow.
Never seen it, but I know, isn't Patrick Swayze in it?
Nope.
No. Okay, well, I could just read this. No, it doesn't have it. Fast and Furious, I've seen like all of them. And
Great
Sandlot,
movies.
I've seen. Goonies, I've probably seen 100 times. Avatar, I've seen at least once. Grosse, Point Blank, that's a real movie.
Yeah.
That was a
Tell me
really
which
fun
ones
one.
are coming up. I could help you out because I've only seen a very small amount.
Well, actually, Grosse Point Blank was a really fun one because I thought that was a different movie for a very long time. Yeah, I thought it was Point Break. So when we went into recording that show, I start watching the movie to refresh my memory on it. And I'm like, hey, this doesn't look familiar. Yeah, it turns out I had never seen it. So
you could have been one of the contestants.
I could have been.
You should push pause and said, hey, we don't need 5 people. I can be one of you. So whose role is whose? Like, so Margarita does something, Kaleb does something, and Jordan does something.
We all rotate through. We all attack this as there is no one singular host. We are all contributors. We are all equals here. Sometimes if we're doing a movie where this is really near and dear to me, like I might take the point and drive the intro and close the show out. But really, for the most part, this is very much a collaborative effort. And we're all divvying up the responsibilities. There's usually 3 different segments in the show. So we each kind of take turns breaking up who introduces this segment, who does this part, so that we're all constantly involved in doing things.
I was going to say that's on the actual recordings. In the background, we have pretty specific roles. Jordan basically handles our casting and scheduling, finding our guests, making sure that we have them scheduled and when we're doing our recording sessions. I handle basically all of the production and post-production and posting. And then Margarita handles a lot of our social media. So we kind of divvy up the behind the scenes work quite a bit.
So you mentioned that Margarita does the social media. Does that mean she also does the marketing? Does nobody do marketing?
If we did marketing, she would play a key role. Now, she basically handles our Facebook and our Instagram. I do a lot of our marketing through our own website. Honestly, we don't market as much as we should, and we know we don't. That's a pretty big weakness of ours, which is probably why we haven't grown to the point that we can monetize yet.
On our show, on the podcast on podcasting, sometimes I talk about the marketing part. And it did seem kind of natural. If she was doing the social media, she might create the promotional materials and she might do the marketing. But on this show, not often enough, probably. So I'm glad it's coming up right now because you were like, that's probably why we're not as big as we want to be. I think of marketing as like the gas in the tank. So like you've got the car, you've got the podcast, right? You got the car. It's there. You got the journey. You got the destination. I want to go from Denver is where I guess we all live in the Denver area. Yeah. And let's just say we want to go to Salt Lake City. No, somewhere else fun. Vegas, almost the same distance, but it's more fun. It's more of a party place. So we want to go to Vegas. Well, it's all good, but we won't really get there if we don't add the fuel to the tank. It won't be amplified the way. Now, we can certainly go behind the car and we can push it. And that's still fuel. That's still marketing. That's just a different type of marketing. That's the type of marketing that we do when it's organic only. It still moves it. And then the paid marketing is the easy stuff where we make the engine do all the work for us. And I agree with you. I think that is a way, if we want to get massive, if we want to get big, if we want to get in front of the right people, movies. Let's just think about movies for a second, because you guys are all in for Avatar. Do you know what their budget was? And maybe one of you guys could type this in if you don't have it, but what was their budget for marketing? Did they
just the marketing budget?
Did they just make the movie and assume that it was going to be fine? Or did they spend hundreds of thousands or millions and millions of dollars on the trailer and getting the trailer on YouTube and at other movies that people were watching? I think they spent a shit ton of money.
I did actually look that up on the show. Their production cost was about $400 million. And then they spent an additional $400 million in marketing and advertising. So they
added fuel to the tank. Yeah. They added $400 million. So anyway, I think that Kaleb, you're the one who I think said we would be a little bit bigger. And I think you're right. If Avatar just made the movie, but didn't spend double the money that they did, probably no one would have watched it. And it wouldn't be in the, how have you not seen that? But if we do the marketing, then it's really going to grow. So I think huge point you made. Love it. So you said that Jordan does the casting and scheduling. Kaleb does the production and post-production. And Margarita right now is doing the social media, and you're going to add the marketing later. I hope she knows that.
Yeah.
Well, when she hears this, she will.
Exactly. Yeah, we're just going to volunteer her for jobs here on your podcast. So
perfect.
Here we go.
And then when she hears this, you're like, I'm not going to talk to her about it. We'll just let her listen to the show, and then she'll know.
Oh, yeah. Not a word. In fact,
you're going to be eating dinner, and she's going to be like, what's wrong, hon? And you're just like, nothing.
You'll hear it next.
All right. So you guys also do improv.
Yeah.
And so your improv group is at least 18 years old since you first met Margarita, right? Is she like, how long have you had your improv group in Denver?
18. We're starting our 18th season this month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So tell me about that. Like, who joins it? How do you get them to join?
Right, it goes back a ways. Jordan and we first met living in Colorado Springs, and we met doing musical theater at some of the professional theaters down there. Just on a whim. And after we'd been doing musical theater and plays and acting for a while, Jordan drugged me to an improv class, kicking and screaming. I did not want to do it. I thought it was the dumbest art form on the planet. And I fell in love. And through that class, Jordan, myself, and one of the guys teaching the class, we decided, let's form our own troupe. So we formed a troupe. We cast a bunch of people. We held open auditions 18 years ago. We ended up casting, I think at the time, 9 people. There were 12 of us to begin.
Yeah.
And then over the years, we continued to go on and train with Second City. They're Chicago based. They're like the Godfathers of improv. And they had a stage here in Denver for a few years. So we trained with Second City. We've toured Canada and the US to different improv festivals and taken different workshops. Throughout the years, the troupe's kind of expanded a little bit. I think at our largest, we were at 16, and we've been down to 4. We've now settled at 5, and we've had the same 5 members for, I want to say, 14 years.
Long time. Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, you don't join the troupe. We're pretty much locked in.
Okay.
That said, we do perform a lot with other groups, like our main troupe, the RIP. That's a set 5. But we do perform a lot here in Denver at like the Chaos Bloom Theater, Rise Comedy. Those are the 2 big improv theaters here in Denver. And we play on multiple troupes there. Basically, hit their website, sign up for a lesson. I will tell you, one of the biggest things improv gave us, it's the only art form we do now. I mean, we were all pursuing professional acting gigs as side hustles, and we've all given that up for improv. Like, we love it that much. And we were all introverts. It's all gotten us out of our shells. It helps with your everyday business life. It's just a lot of fun to be an adult and play. Let's say like sign up, go. They have drop-ins, performances all the time. Get out there and do some improv.
So Kaleb just said that improv helps with business. And I was already starting to prepare a question around that, which I have a business coach that I pay stupid amounts of money to.
Yeah.
And this business coach, you have one too?
Yeah.
Okay. This business coach, when I'm giving him all this money, guess what he tells me? He says, you need to go to like meetup groups or improv groups around comedy or improv, where you can learn to really think on your feet, speak on your feet. And he started naming that it's really good for sales. It's really good for speaking gigs. It's really good for coaching program, your business, just like Kaleb just said. And I believe, in addition, our podcast. So if we can practice this improv and or comedy, which kind of go hand in hand, because improv is generally going to have some comedy, right? Or am I wrong?
Hopefully. Yeah. I mean, there is dramatic improv out there, but it's not very good if I'm being honest.
That's interesting. I can't even imagine that. It sounds funny just hearing it. Dramatic improv. Yeah. Anyway. So Jordan, I'll turn this question to Jordan specifically because Kaleb's had a little bit under the mic just a second ago, but thinking about what you've learned coming out of your shell, like Kaleb said, by doing this improv for the last 18 years and having the same core group, I think for 13 or 15 years, what have you learned that you can take to other things like business or podcasting coaching? What are some specific tangibles that you've gained because of it?
Well, first of all, I'd say I'm still very much introverted, but you do come out of your shell. I would say that probably one of the biggest takeaways from it is just learning how to interact and accept and continue forward with people and folks. And that's why they say that it's probably so much more, it's so great and beneficial for things like sales, because you're always focusing on what you can do in sales, not what you can't do for somebody, right? Because that is how you keep a client interested. You don't want to tell them, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. That's putting a negative connotation in their head, right? So improv is all based around the concept of yes and. I'm focusing on accepting what has been offered and adding to it so that we can progress forward. And so in everyday life, it's kind of the same idea that if I say no to something, that's just going to stop the conversation right there. But if I say yes to it, that's going to keep us moving forward in a positive direction. So I think that's a lot of where businesses and companies, corporations, that's why a lot of folks send their people to improv classes to learn how to continue to move things forward like that.
Very cool. Very cool. Kaleb, did you have something to add? Almost looked like you started to take a breath.
The idea of yes and is so huge. In a lot of big companies will run their board meetings off of that. And in fact, whenever we meet as a podcast or as an improv troupe, if anybody says the words no, but they have to do 10 push-ups immediately. Like we enforce the yes, and you have to just agree with what somebody has said and build upon it. You don't have to like blindly say, oh, yes, whatever, but it's accepting the truth that's given to you and building upon that reality. And it's a powerful way to run things. Like if you accept that in your podcast or your business or your everyday life, like the next time you have an argument with your significant other, try using yes and versus no, but. It's transformative.
I'll tell you that we never would have got this podcast off the ground had we not had a yes and mentality. When we got serious about this last year, Margarita and I had a phone call to say, because she had ideas and I had ideas. And instead of saying, no, I want to do this idea, or no, I want to do this idea, we got together on the phone and she said, what if we did this? I said, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And let's add this to it. So it really started to build creativity from there. So just imagine if you're sitting in a marketing meeting and somebody said, well, what if we advertise like this? And someone just put their hand up and said, no, I don't like that. It's going to kill your idea and kill your creativity, kill your process. So just saying yes, adding on to it, it's just going to inspire so many new ideas to come out and take you in directions that you didn't even know you could go.
Yeah. And yes, and my business coach that I mentioned before, Sean, he also talks about something you're saying kind of in the same realm, Jordan. You know Disney, Walt Disney World and everything like that?
Never heard of it.
No, okay. They're
New little upstart in
yes,
California.
and
Yeah.
all right. Well, one thing that's interesting about them is they have engineers that build everything, but they've also hired these people called Imagineers.
Yeah.
That think of everything. And what they do intentionally kind of goes along with what you're saying. And I think this is good for any business. This is good for anybody trying to figure out what their vision in life or what their vision for a business or their purpose or what their podcast is going to look like. So what they do is they have engineers and they also have Imagineers. And the Imagineers get in a room with no engineers. You're not allowed to say anything like that would be good, but the technology isn't there.
Right.
Or anything like this. So they come up with rides. They come up with attractions. They come up with anything that they want. And the Imagineers are only allowed to add on top, only allowed to build things up, come up with the craziest of ideas. And they keep the engineers in a totally different place because the engineers are the ones that are so practical. They're the ones that are supposed to be poo-poo on ideas. So what after they go through the Imagineer phase, the Imagineers stop and they move the project into the different room with the engineers, and the engineers try their hardest to just build those things with what they have.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing a lot of this with us in our business and you building the podcast and having that conversation with Margarita about yes and, yes and, yes and. It's all about imagining it and not poo-pooing it. For example, we're like, I want to start a podcast about this. But this one thing, but I don't know what I'm doing, but I haven't done it before, but I'm not good online, but technology not savvy, but I don't know if I have the money. And so we start an idea, it wants to blossom, and then we will cut it off at the knees because in our own realm, we don't know exactly how it's going to come about. So we're already engineering our Imagineer. And I'm hearing that with you and building your podcast. It's all about just expanding on the ideas. I do that with my own team. I have 30 employees. And when we get in meetings, I never use that Imagineer engineer. I just say, there's no bad ideas. I want to hear anything you think of that we can do to serve more clients. And just throw out ideas. Everybody has to at least have 3 ideas, and we're not going to poo-poo on any idea.
Yeah, Kaleb will tell you that he had a foot in the door with his production company, having a little bit of knowledge about how to do a few things, but he didn't know how to start a podcast. He didn't know how to get us up on any of these platforms. He just went and figured it out. He just went and did it all. He did the research. He looked it up on Google. He listened to a few podcasts. He just went and figured out how to get all of this post-production stuff done and then just went and did it. He didn't let that idea of, well, we want to do a podcast, but we don't know how to do it, get in the way. He just said, all right, I'm just going to go do it. I'm learning Photoshop right now just because Kaleb gave me the idea a few months ago to Photoshop our faces onto movie posters. And I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to learn it because I thought it was a cool idea. So we're releasing part of our first attempt at marketing and advertising here is putting ourselves onto old movie posters in creative ways. We're not letting anything get in our way because we don't know how to do it. We're just going to go figure it out. And we made a bunch of mistakes the first few times, but that's how you learn. That's how you get better. That's how you move forward.
I'm going to quote you. We made a bunch of mistakes the first times. I want to talk about this for a second. If you redid the podcast, and we can start with Kaleb, give me 1 or 2 things that you would do differently. And Jordan, after, give me 1 or 2 things that you think you would do differently. If you were starting the podcast now, it's been about a year.
Yeah.
But with your year's experience, nobody had done this before. What have you learned that would change anything? Kaleb, you first.
I think for us, it's tricky for me to say what I would do differently. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years and I've literally made my whole living off of just jumping in both first and figuring it out along the way. But I think some of the things I would do is I would have a better marketing plan. Even a couple of episodes in, I may have just proof of concept at first to see if we had something. But once I knew we had something, I tried to get the word out there better. I mean, we're only up to like 600 subscribers across all platforms. So we haven't hit that magical 1,000 mark yet where we can monetize on the platform that we're on. Marketing would be a big deal. And I think that's probably the number one. Experimenting a little more in the early phases. I still think we should experiment more. Entertainment can grow really stale really quickly. And if you're not constantly innovating, that's one thing that I think we continue to strive to do. And then probably just recording more, just getting more out. Like we started every other week, became a little overwhelming. So we've kind of settled on an every 3-week deal now with the idea that we'll get there every other week again. Our podcast is it takes a lot of effort leading up to it takes hours to plan 30-minute episodes. So maybe simplifying the format would be a little better so we could record more often.
I think it's interesting, by the way, that you can have 5 people on a podcast, all having roles, and have the entire thing 32 minutes max, 26 minutes.
That was intentional. We didn't to be snack sized. I mean, we all listen to a lot of podcasts, and it's to the point where it takes a lot of effort to get through an hour-long podcast because there's so many amazing podcasts. We wanted it to be a commuter podcast. We wanted somebody to be able to jump in their car, and by the time they get to their office, they finished our episode.
So, but Kaleb let's just take the Goonies for a second. Kaleb's seen it. Jordan's seen it. Margarita's seen it. But you all will watch it 1 or 2 more times.
Yeah.
You'll all write down a few questions. Oh, here, what do you call that when it's not? Trivia. You'll write down trivia questions and things like that. And you'll have to schedule with a couple of other people that literally have never seen it. You have to find those people, and then you have to schedule and make it all work. So I totally understand that even every 3 weeks could be a lot for that type of intensity, that type of production. So I'm definitely understanding that. I got 3 things from you, Kaleb. You said if you were to do anything differently, the number 1 would be marketing plan. Number 2 would be keeping it entertaining, which you're already doing. You just would really keep focusing on that. And the third one was to record more. And it sounds like the hope would be to do it every other week instead of every 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think biweekly would be great. Part of our issue is because it's such an intense format that we've chosen. And I think a lot of that comes from our entertainment backgrounds, that we really need to get it to a point where it is monetizable. Like we can make some money off of it to justify it, because the post-production and the research alone will take a day or 2 out of my work week as the sole entrepreneur in the group who's self-employed. But I'm stealing from my own company to make my podcast. So it's kind of a means to an end situation that we're trying to build. We're trying to build yet another entertainment platform amongst the entertainment platforms we have. So it's less of a marketing vehicle for us where we're trying to use it on that weekly basis just to get the word out about our real estate company or our investment firm or our production company or things like that I think a lot of people use it for. And we're trying to build an entertainment platform that in itself can be something people subscribe to and support, and then we advertise on. So it's more of a traditional entertainment episodic model that we're trying to base it off of.
Cool. I definitely want to talk to you a little bit more, Kaleb, because I didn't realize you were in real estate and investments either. I've been doing that a lot since 2005. So just interesting that we had that in common, and Denver. Jordan, if you made any changes at all, let's say you have a whole year of knowledge, but you have to launch the podcast this next week, what would you do differently?
Yeah, that's a really tough question to answer, because this thing has been such an evolution over the past year that I don't know that you don't jump in and get good right away. It takes those kinds of growing pains. Interestingly enough, I just watched The Flash for the first time last night, and that whole movie is about how the scars that you have are what made you what you are today, right? So if we had not gone through those growing pains, I don't know that we're even as fun and entertaining as we are with the podcast. Now, that said, as Kaleb said, I would definitely want to have a better marketing and advertising plan. I would definitely want to have a better way of getting the word out there about our show, rather than just we're all posting on social media and tagging everybody on it, because that's pretty much what we're doing right now. So I'd want to have a better marketing and advertising plan. And I'd also like to streamline our production process. it is a very lengthy, drawn out process. It takes time out of Kaleb's day. It takes time out of, like, I'm usually spending a good month before a recording prepping for a recording, because I need to go find, first of all, I just need to go find people that we think would be good guests on the show. Like we said earlier, we're targeting improvisers because they're great at just making stuff up off the top of their head and coming up with creative answers to these questions that they're going to know nothing about. So I got to find, first of all, people that are interesting, that could get good answers from our prompts, and that have availability and willingness to be on the podcast. And then also have a movie in common that they haven't seen. That's something that we want to talk about because it's really near and dear to us. Again, ideally, we'd love to do The Princess Bride, but I haven't found anybody that hasn't seen that movie. So sometimes we're going to be stuck with a movie that isn't really one of our favorites, but it's what's available to us. And then the research that it takes to do it. So there's just a lot of going into coordinating all of the setup to get us to the point where we just can record. So having a better plan to streamline that, and we've come across a good one so far. We've got a nice professional looking survey that we send out to folks. I can send it to you if you want to be on the podcast, Adam. We'd love to reciprocate here and get you on at some point. And so maybe I'll send you the link to our Google form. You can kind of take a look at how we're surveying these guests and saying, okay, here's the movies that we're looking for. And then we'll try to match people up based on those movies. And hopefully we can get somebody that hasn't seen one of our favorites one of these times.
Yeah. Each time you do an episode, you always are going to have a competition between two people that have not seen it. Have you ever considered just having one person who hasn't seen it?
We're working on a format right now that we have two new formats. We have one that is a championship between the two co-hosts. So we just recorded one that'll come out in November where Margarita and I compete against each other. Neither of us have seen Labyrinth. So we compete. It's like a championship. Cool. And Jordan was the singular host. And then we're doing another variation of an episode where we're basically
You haven't seen Labyrinth? I swear I've seen that 30 times.
What a great movie.
That I haven't seen that you have. But then we're also working with other formats. That's where I also talk about like trying to stay innovative and keep it entertaining. We're trying to come up with a new format, and we're really close to nailing it down, where it's the three of us talking about like a hidden gem movie that maybe one of us discovered, a more modern movie. Like there's one that just came out that Guy Ritchie directed called Project Fortune or Operation Fortune that these two haven't seen that I think they would love. So I'm going to get on the podcast and we're going to talk about it. Still keep it gamified a little bit, but a quicker, easier thing for us to do that just the three of us can get on and record, and then fill those in with our release schedule so that it makes it a little less intensive and a little less research intensive as well.
Cool. Love it. Jordan, I like the part about the Google form, and I just want to bring it to the listener's attention. It's something that is a form that is all over the place, that always updates when you update it. And it's a good way for us if we're bringing people on. So that could be something for us to think about, especially if our show is kind of, I don't know if complicated is the best word for it, but it has a lot of moving parts. Your show does. And
it's a great way for us to cross collaborate.
Yeah, that's cool. So then let me just mention, Jordan said, if there's going to be three, because I think I heard three-ish.
Did I?
The first one really being scars are beneficial. So you wouldn't be who you are without it. And you referenced a movie that you were watching, I think yesterday, that really showed that's how we develop our character. The second thing you mentioned, which is kind of the first real thing you would change, is the marketing advertising plan. And the third thing that I heard was streamlining the production process to make it easier on Kaleb. So we're hearing marketing, keep it entertaining, scars are beneficial, and of course, streamlining the production process to make it easier for you. Loving it. The Google form was really, really good. We're going to jump off of this episode to the listener. Every other episode on this podcast, on the podcast on podcasting, is a solo episode where I research something for you that I think that you need to know. And that's actually going to be the next episode. It'd be a very short episode as opposed to this 45-ish minute long interview episode. So I suggest that you jump in and check that out. I'm loving that they spread the work during their actual podcast recordings. So where Kaleb might bring it in on one, Jordan might bring it in on a different one, and Marguerite on another. And that they keep more definitive roles for their actual duties that are not while they're recording. So for example, Jordan does the casting and scheduling. Kaleb does the production and post-production. Margarita does the social media and soon marketing. Because you both said you need to do marketing. So I know someone's going to take that job.
We know what our weakness is.
If we had more time, I would learn more about how Kaleb, you mentioned that you're kind of monetizing the show. It's kind of benefiting in a way with your businesses like the improv group and also Moxie, your other company. If we had more time, I think we would really spend time understanding how that works. At this point, I think we can just jump off, but I wanted to say thank you to both of you and let you know that your bios are in the show notes. As long as you already gave them to me, they are in the show notes. All the links to any social you wanted to share is in the show notes. And the links to your podcast, How Have You Not Seen That, is also in the show notes for the listener so they can find you, connect with you, fill out your form, Jordan, that Google form, because I bet you some of our listeners haven't heard or seen every single movie. So that's where you would find that. That's where you can connect with these guys. And I will see you on the next episode.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You know, I really don't say this nearly enough. I don't mention this and I feel horrible because it's a great resource for you to be able to take your podcast to the next level. And it's simply a free resource that I don't need your email or anything. It's just a podcasting course that I created that is ended up putting in the very first 6 episodes of this podcast. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely going to want to just check out those first 6 episodes, see how they can help you improve your podcast, get in front of more people, and have a better result where you're making more money through the podcast, etc. So much can happen after you listen through episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you haven't done it, go do it now. And by the way, if you're subscribed, you'll keep hearing more great content. So to those of you who are, I'll see you on the next episode.